Hey guys, it's Enzo. So just want to give a quick intro to this episode of the Prism Pod. It was phenomenal. It was a Dr. Katie Lee, and she's a really, really great entrepreneur who's driving a lot of really positive impact in the world. And I thought that her story was beautiful because it was a unique and, prime example of this cycle that happens in life where early on, Dr. Lee had this really, really hard time in her life. And somebody stepped in and helped her through that time, and that person inspired her and launched her into this trajectory where she was able to drive a ton of positive impact in the world through all these phenomenal projects you guys are going to hear about. So her story is really inspiring. It really inspired me personally. I know that you guys are going to love it. Welcome to the Prism Podcast. Thank you so much for doing this, and I'm really excited. To learn about your journey and that was kind of where I wanted to start, was like how you got started with your journey and how you kind of got interested in your passions. Like, what were you kind of thinking about, like, when you were younger and when you were first thinking, like, getting, in school? Like, what did you kind of want to do with your life? Like, I would just love to start, from the beginning.
So I originally started out wanting to be a doctor. I'm from a super small farm town in central Illinois. And so my whole life I wanted to be a doctor and like a plastic surgeon. And then when I was 14 years old, I was fortunate enough, or unfortunate, how depends on how you look at it. I was involved in a really horrific ATV accident where I was riding four-wheeler. I didn't wear a helmet that day. And I crashed head first into a telephone pole going 35 miles an hour. I broke every bone in my face from my eyebrows down. And I was in a coma for a few days. And when I woke up, my jaws were completely wired shut. I had a cast on my arm, and I was missing a bunch of front teeth. And so for the next 2 months, I was undergoing surgeries and things like that. And during that time, I was unable to eat, obviously. And this was like before. This was in the 90s, right? So before like smoothies and protein shakes and all that. I think we had like Slim Fast back then, but that was about it. And Shore maybe. But I was surviving off of ice cream with Hershey syrup, pudding, Jello, and boxed mashed potatoes. That was my diet. And so I lost a bunch of weight very quickly, became emaciated, malnourished. My liver enzymes spiked and my kidneys started shutting down. And so I learned at a very young age and very quickly just how much your mouth affects the health of the rest of your body. And then when I got my wires removed 8 weeks later, I remember I had friends with me in the doctor's office because we were going to go to Olive Garden. I wanted an Olive Garden breadstick.
Oh, they're the best.
I remember, I really remember I was like, could not wait to eat Olive Garden breadsticks. And so they came with me to my doctor's office or doctor's appointment. They cut my wires and I could not open my mouth. And so what had happened was my jaw joint fused shut. So it took 4 more years and 9 reconstructive surgeries for me to be able to look the way that I do now and for me to be able to have a mandible that, functions partially well. And during that time, I still am missing teeth because the dentist really can't get in there to fix any teeth or replace the missing ones. And so I had to wear retainers with teeth on them as, a freshman high school girl, just trying to like fit in, with the cool kids in high school and play all the sports that I was into. And so it really affected me, mentally and emotionally as well. And so during that whole time, obviously I was working with a lot of doctors, and then I had this wonderful dentist. He was our small town dentist, and he really showed me a lot of compassion and empathy as I was going through this and did the best that he could to meet me where I was at. And I remember my senior year of high school, I was finally able to get my dental implants and restore my smile permanently. And I remember, he put the implant crown in, I looked in the mirror, and it was like a light bulb went off. And I was like, this is what I want to do for people. And so, I had a traumatic event that led me into dentistry, which I find fortunate because so many people, grow up and don't really have a direction that they want to go, and they have to kind of search that out. Whereas mine just kind of like, pun intended, hit me in the face with it. So that's how I got into dentistry.
So, oh my gosh, wow, that's amazing. And then from there, like,
where did you kind of take it from there? Or what were the kind of the next steps that, like what was kind of the next phase of your journey? I mean, I'm sure like, I mean, that's such like a powerful, catalyst and a powerful way to start it, right? And a powerful fuel to, get you into and I'm sure that there was a lot of like, I mean, you had to overcome a ton more obstacles on your way too,
Mhm.
to just, to get, even further and to become, get into your career. And, I would just like, what was kind of the next step and what did you do next? How'd you get over that?
Yeah. So the first thing that I did was I wanted to make sure that I liked dentistry. Obviously I knew how it made me feel, but I wanted to make sure I liked the profession. So I started
Mm,
as a dental assistant at his office, um, which he did not need, some high school teenager coming in there as a dental assistant. And so he kind of created a position for me in the office. And I was really just like the errand girl, right? But he was gracious
mm,
enough to call me a dental assistant. He was gracious enough to pay me well. Um, but it really got me this incredible exposure to how to run a practice, how to lead a team, how to treat patients, and how to be successful, and a role model in the community. I mean, he's to this day is he's retired now, but he's such a role model. Um, and so that, confirmed that I wanted to do, dentistry. And so once I got out of school, um, I had put myself through undergrad and through dental school. So I had an exorbitant amount of student loan debt.
mm.
And I graduated in 2010, which was in the middle of the recession. And so
Wow.
dentistry historically has been known as this like booming profession, with lots of opportunity and lots of money. But when I graduated, nobody was hiring. All the people, that wanted to retire no longer could because they lost all their money. The economy slowed down, so people weren't taking on associates. I graduated number 2 in my class, but because of the amount of debt that I had, I didn't feel like I could go on and specialize because, as you go on to specialty school, you're not getting paid, you're taking out more loans, and the loans you already have are accruing interest. And so I started to panic about the amount of debt that I was accruing. And so I just wanted to get out there and work. And so I remember sending my resume. Back then it was by paper. So I mailed it out to like 50 different places. And I only got 2 responses with, being number 2 in the class. I could have specialized if I wanted to, I had all this experience as an assistant, and I only got 2 interviews. And one was for a pediatric corporate office. And then the other one was for a corporate dental chain in Denver, Colorado. And I knew that I didn't want to work with screaming kids all day. I
Mm,
think pediatric dentists are saints that they can do that. And so I took the only job that I really could. And so my plan was to work at the corporate dental chain office for 2 years, get some experience, and then go back to my hometown dentist and take over his practice.
mm,
And within a couple months, because I had all of this experience as an assistant, and when I say experience, again, it's just exposure, right? To how an office is supposed to be
right.
run. I turned the office from being the worst office in the state for that company to being the best.
Oh my
I was
gosh.
offered to buy into the practice. I started in June, and I was offered to buy in October, which was the
Wow.
soonest anyone in the company had been offered. I was the youngest owner in the company, and within 1 year being out of dental school, I got 2 more practices. So I owned 3 offices within my first year out of school. And so then it just spiraled from there.
Oh my God. Yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh. That's so powerful. Like what was it? I mean, like going back to those, I mean, that moment of like how you were able to solve, these key problems to help them and accelerate their business so much. Like what were those? I mean, was it kind of like there were a bunch of things like you saw that could be like improved and then you kind of picked a few, or how did you kind of prioritize that? Or what were like the things that really stuck out that really helped you,
You know,
help that practice?
it really had nothing to do. I'm I'm totally going to underwhelm you now, but it really had nothing to do with like how do I help the practice versus
Hmm.
how do I help the patients and how do I survive, because I was only being offered $450 a day to
Hmm.
practice, which is like
Wow.
that's like what hygienists make now.
Hmm.
If not more than that. Hygienists make
Right.
way more than that actually. And so I did all the math with my apartment and I had to take a loan out, a $7,000 loan to move to Colorado from Illinois to take this job. So I had that debt. So I calculated all my expenses, and then I calculated what I would make, and I panicked because I was going to come up short on just basic living expenses. That doesn't include, having fun and going out and things like that. And so that was really motivating of like, holy crap, I made this decision to be a dentist and to move, halfway across country. So I got to figure out how to work. So I asked the company if I could start working Saturdays. And of course they loved that idea because now I'm working 6 days a week generating for them. But then there was this like burning desire to like get in and help patients as much as possible. So I think I was willing to work way harder than the average person. One, because of my own debt, but number two, I was just so excited to finally be able to improve patients' lives the way that mine was improved by my dentist. So I think it was twofold, and it wasn't planned, but just reflecting back, that's kind of what drove the success.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh. And I mean, amidst all that, I mean, that uncertainty, right? Like that's so hard. I think that like that's one of the things I wanted to ask you about as you were talking about the story was like, were there ever times where you were not sure if this was the right move and you were thinking of, maybe doing something else, or like, how did you know to kind of keep pushing forward and be like, yeah, I'm going to make this move and I'm going to go out here and I'm going to, keep on pushing. Like, how did you kind of cultivate that strength, that inner strength to be like, I want to really do this?
Yeah. I mean, the move to Colorado was really, scary for me because I grew up in a small town in Illinois, and I went to college in a small town, but then I went to dental school in Chicago. And I never quite felt like I fit in to Illinois. It just never felt like home. I don't know how to explain it unless someone has had this experience before. Like, I know I was born and raised there, but like I just was not a happy person in
Hmm.
Illinois. And I'm a really active person. I love sunshine. I love to be outdoors. And like Illinois does not offer you that. And when I was in dental school, we had to spend a few months our senior year out in the community serving community health centers. And so our options were either south side of Chicago or northwest Illinois, both not good areas to be in. Or you could go to Colorado. And I had never, I'd been to Florida like once or twice, but I really had never left home. I'd never been more than 90 minutes away from home. And I said, let's give it a shot. Let's go out to Colorado. And when I got to Colorado, I mean, it was like the clouds lifted, the sea parted, the angels came down from heaven, and I just felt,
Awesome.
I felt like home here. And so I just knew that I had to get out of Illinois. So like that, that was a no-brainer for me. So I really didn't have any, like, in my mind, another option of going back. It was, this is what I have to make this work. In terms of like feeling, was I ever fearful that I got into like way more than I can handle? No. I feel like if you can survive a crash going 35 miles an hour into a telephone pole and not die, and even after that crash, I came out and I excelled in every sport I was in. I was always sport captain. I was valedictorian of height. Like if I can survive that, like this is cake, right? But I had many sleepless nights for sure, having anxiety, like, am I doing the right treatment for patients? Can I pay my bills? Many sleepless nights over that. Did the patients like me? I got that bad review. Oh my gosh, my reputation's ruined. So I had a lot of those anxieties, but never a question if I could do it or not.
Yeah. And like, what kind of like advice would you give to somebody, I mean, who's like younger like that, or in like a similar kind of situation like that you were kind of going through, like, to know, like, to kind of cultivate that, like, oh, I can do this, and like to get over those challenges of like, oh, like this patient bad review came in or whatever, like what kind of advice would you give to somebody who's in that kind of position, today?
That's hard, especially because I did for a long time. We tie our worth to our craft as dentists oftentimes.
Mm,
And so when someone leaves a bad review or insults our dentistry, it's almost like we take it as if they're insulting us personally.
mm,
Especially, let's say you offer a treatment plan to a patient and you know that this treatment plan is really going to help the patient, but they say no. we often take it personally, like, oh, they didn't like me, or they didn't trust me, or they didn't think I, had the expertise, when really that's not the case, right? There's so many other things going on for that patient outside of the office that we don't know that could be, causing them to say no or react the way that they do. And I would say, number one, it's normal to feel anxious and uncomfortable in the beginning. I would say, people would always ask me, how long did it take you before you stopped having anxiety in the middle of your workday while working with patients? Or how long did it take you to stop having sleepless nights over patients? I still have sleepless nights over patients, and I haven't practiced for over a year. So, and I'm still thinking about those cases that I did. So that will never go away. But I think that is good, because it means that we care about our people. I think the doc that goes to sleep at night and doesn't think twice about what they did, to a human being, that kind of worries me a little bit.
Yeah, right.
And then in terms of having, anxiety in the practice while I'm working, I mean, it took me a good 5 years before I felt confident and like, I can handle the schedule, I can handle all these treatments and the patients. But if you're not uncomfortable, you're not growing and you're not becoming a better clinician. So I really want the younger generation, and I can say that I'm going to be 40 next week. I want them to know that, like, it's okay to be anxious. It's okay to like get a little uncomfortable in your chair. I think these days, we don't want to ruffle anybody's feathers or make anyone uncomfortable. And like, that's not life. Life's meant to be hard. So always think back, for every one bad thing that happens, you can name 10 to 15 good things that happened that you did. And so when I get in that negative headspace, I try and remind myself, like I said earlier, I've already been through life or death trauma, right? Like, this is nothing. I can do this. And so I try and remind myself of situations like that to pull myself out of the negative space.
Yeah, wow. That's such a powerful perspective to have. Even like it's as it a positive thing, right? Like that some of those stressors are sometimes a positive thing, and that like you can learn so many like lessons from that, and that can shift life into some really beautiful ways. I think that, yeah, that's so beautifully said, and like putting yourself out there too, like it's
Mm-hmm.
hard. And I mean, that was one of the other things that I really wanted to ask you about, was like the journey of your book, and like how that inspiration kind of came about. And I mean, that's really, putting yourself out there and putting your
Yeah.
ideas and perspectives out there. So yeah, that's a whole nother level to it. But yeah, I would just love to hear
Yeah.
more about that.
That was a passion project for me. So I ended up leaving my past job in January of 2023 because I had, after many years, was able to have a son in May. And so he's going to be 1 in a couple of months.
Oh, congrats. Yeah, that's
Thanks.
awesome.
And I had, been really successful at my previous career. And so I wanted to make sure that I had the headspace to be present for my son while he was a baby. But I'm very passionate about oral systemic health because of my own experience. And what I found in my practices was that nobody, or very few people, knew this information. And I found myself on repeat talking to dentists, hygienists, and patients about how tight the oral systemic link is. And so when I left, I was like, if I could do one thing, it would be to better educate the public on the oral systemic link, to try and drive more patients in to get care, because people don't realize like how much they could affect their overall health if they just took better care of their mouth. And so I thought, I'm sitting around waiting for my son to come. So I thought, well, let me just write down all my patient stories. And let me write down everything that I know about oral systemic health. And I'm not an expert. I want to make sure that people understand, like, I'm not positioning myself as an oral systemic health expert. There's people with way more knowledge than me, but I do believe that I have a way of simplifying it so that people can understand it. And so I wrote the book at a patient level for patients. It's a very cheeky writing. It's very much conversational when you read it. It's a very easy read. And I've gotten I've only gotten, I shouldn't say this, but I've gotten very positive feedback. Because I think people understand what I'm trying to do, which is just help. That's it. But yeah, that's a whole new way of putting yourself out there. I'm not a writer.
Yeah.
And so to write a book and put that out there, yeah, it was scary. But I'm just trying to help improve patients' health. That's it.
Yeah, oh my gosh. It's such a beautiful journey. I think because it's like, this arc of, you going in finding this thing that you're so passionate about. You're like, I really want to help people like this dentist and doctor who helped me. And then like going through this journey of like learning all of that and then
Mhm.
taking what you've learned and then now like applying that to, I mean, to help and teach the best parts of that to other people. It's in moving the space forward. It's so
Yeah.
beautiful. And I mean, it looked too like you were also like educating other dentists as well and like helping them and helping do consulting and stuff. And I was wondering if you could tell me more about that and
Yeah.
yeah, how
So
that
I would say
works.
that to be honest and fully transparent, that was intentional. However, I've worked with a lot of dentists. I own a lot of practices across the United States. So I've worked with a lot of personalities. And I know that the best way to try and affect change sometimes is not coming at someone directly, right? Sometimes you got to come step from the side and go along their journey with them. And so it was very intentional that I wrote the book for patients, but I also made the book heavily resourced and heavily researched. I mean, there's like close to 100 studies in there that I quoted. Actually, I shouldn't say that. I don't know. There's a lot of studies in there that I quoted. I should actually count how many they were. But I did that because I wanted this to be a very low barrier to entry for a clinician that hasn't started down the path of oral systemic health, for them to read the book, see that there's actual research in the book, and then say, maybe I should look into this, and then dive into oral systemic health further. So that was intentional. And not like an intentional plan A, but like I knew in the back of my mind, hey, some clinicians are going to read this and they're going to be asking questions, which is ultimately what we want, right? If we educate patients and they go see their dentist and they're asking for this stuff, or a clinician stumbles upon this and they start asking questions, the best thing we can do is start a conversation. So that's what I was intending to do.
Beautifully said. And I mean oh my gosh, well, I mean I know we're getting close to the end here, but I mean it's just we've talked about this amazing journey that you've had already, and I mean these awesome projects that are so beautiful. I mean the way that you're impacting people's lives and helping them understand these things and being so thoughtful about lowering that barrier to entry and making it easier, for people to understand and get into this world and start to go down the rabbit hole. I think just getting people down that initially is one of the hardest things, and so
Mm-hmm.
lowering that barrier to entry is so fantastic. And yeah, like what's next? Like what are you most excited about? Like what are you working on next? And yeah, what's coming up?
Yeah, so I have a huge project coming up. I'm in the middle of building a fully integrated medical dental healthcare center here in Colorado, where we're going to have medicine and dentistry under one roof, fully integrated, bringing together alternative methods of medicine, which I really believe in, that is research based, utilizes science, and then connecting that with dentistry. So that's really the culmination of oral systemic health, right? And so one thing I found with my patients is that when they would come in and I would educate them on all this, how their microbiome's affecting some of their systemic diseases, I would send them to these, or I would try and find them these healthcare practitioners that could treat them. I mean, even just a primary care doctor. And, the wait time was too long to get into the primary care, or the primary care wasn't up to speed on oral systemic health. And so I found a lot of people, like the buck would stop at my office and people were coming to me with medical concerns and asking my advice. And I'm not a physician. I'm not qualified to answer those. And so, I thought, okay, this next phase, why not put it under one roof? Let's also include some alternative modalities in there that are so crucial to health. We're going to address sleep airway issues, which is so vital. We're going to be addressing, nutrition, and I don't want to give away everything, but it'll be here in 2025. I'm so
That's awesome.
excited, scared shitless. I've been out of debt since I was like 29 years old, and I'm going back into debt because I believe in this project so much. So I hope I can do it.
Oh, I know that you can, Dr. Lee. I know that you can. I mean, even just from hearing it in our conversation, like about these crazy challenges that you've overcome and like what you've been able to do, I have full faith. I know you can do these things.
Thank you.
And that's so amazing. I mean, it's like a one-stop shop where someone can really, I mean, just making it easier for the patient and for people to get access to this really high quality care. it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful to hear that. So
Yeah, I'm
um,
hoping people from all over the country will come, just to receive better, complete care. That's the hope.
awesome. Is there somewhere like where we can kind of and where everyone can kind of follow along with that project? I mean, is it on your Instagram or where's kind of the best way, or on your website? Like, where's the best way for all of us to follow along with your projects?
So I'm going to be doing a ton of project updates. Come along with me. Here's the video. Oh my gosh, I have no idea what I'm doing. Someone who's built an office, please call me. So I would love anyone's advice and help. Instagram's probably the best way. So Katie Lee DDS on Instagram. I will be asking for a lot of people's help and advice. So I would really appreciate the guidance there. And then the website too is always good, katieleedds.com. And then the biggest thing is if someone is curious about oral systemic health, read the book, Saved by the Mouth on Amazon. It is a super easy read. It'll take you a couple hours, but it'll give you some tips and tricks on where to start with that process as well.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Lee. And I
You're
mean, everyone
welcome.
we'll put links to Dr. Lee's book on the Instagram and the website right below this. So definitely go check those out and follow along with all of this. But yeah, Dr. Lee, thank you so much for doing this and for putting yourself out there on here and our podcast and sharing your experience. I mean, just for me personally, it was just so cool and inspiring to hear your
Thank
story.
you.
So thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I really
My
appreciate it.
pleasure.